Okay, happy people, welcome back. Look at us. New school year. Irene's happy and she's waving. We're all happy. Good to see you guys. How are you today?
We're great. I'm great.
You're great. Sarah, change your name, then you'll be even better.
That's a really good name, Sarah. I'm like, wait, I'm not Carolyn O'Hearn.
Fix it. Come on. Pull it together. Come on.
We just spend so much time being Sarah Lynn. It's just fine.
We have a certain level we try to attain here. This is pretty much it, just getting our names right. That's the level we're striving for right now.
From Rockford, Illinois.
Hey there, everybody. I saw the team before. Hello, team. Good to see you all. Good to see everybody.
Nice to see you guys.
Yeah. I had a really obnoxious kickoff for this that I was going to say, same great AT town hall, same lack of planning. And so there you go. I have a couple questions we could start with for conversation. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm excited for this. I'm excited to be back. What's good? What's good so far? Some of us have been around in back in class a little longer, unless I'm looking at you, than the rest of us. Alyssa, has the year beaten you down yet?
Getting close.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, we're getting close. Our staff came back on August 2nd. So we are over a month in for our staff, and our students started on the 10th of August. Nice. So we are full on.
You're in.
Yeah.
The rest of us are just working in right now, but you're full in. Wow.
We just had we're at the halfway point for the first quarter. So we were the same.
Yeah. Has it beaten you down as much as it has Alyssa yet?
It's been busy.
Okay, there you go. Busy in a good way?
Yeah,
both of you
sure.
Busy in a good way?
Yes.
Yeah, Kelly says yes, Alyssa says maybe not.
I think it all depends on your definition of good.
My definition of good is that you're still here and you're still smiling. That's my definition.
So then yes, just I mean, we are seeing the tremendous, or at least I feel I'm seeing a tremendous COVID bubbly experience. I don't know how to describe it other than that. It's all of the kids who we have a tremendous amount of kids who had not returned to us previously last year post-COVID. They stayed virtual, they were homeschooled. And we have kids that were set to come to pre-K right when COVID happened. Mm-hmm. They didn't come, and now they are full-on kindergartners and have no identified disability, no nothing, that have obvious significant needs or even mild needs, and are sitting in gen ed kindergarten because they never went through the pre-K referral process.
Right. Yeah. So now you're rushing to catch up to identify people and get them in the right spot. Yeah. Anybody else seeing those kinds of experiences? Did that resonate with anybody else? Alyssa's nightmare?
Maybe it's just me. It's okay if it's just me.
It's okay. Listen, thanks for taking the hit for everybody. I appreciate it.
We have some of those also, especially in our kindergarten. We're seeing a lot of challenging things in a lot of our kindergartens.
So let me ask you both then, and then obviously anybody else, but I'll ask both of you. What do you do? How do you do? What's your plan?
Work really hard to provide tier 1 supports.
Yeah.
So that's where we have kind of a district-wide core board for kids with communication needs, providing teachers with just good tier 1 supports while we're trying to get processes in place. And then we also just had a bunch of pre-K kids that were identified that did have significant needs that have all transitioned to kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And some of them are all happening in the same class, where we know we've got kids that are not identified, and then we've got kids that are identified and have lots of needs, and they all happen to be in the same gen ed kindergarten class. So, I mean, I think to me, it's about how do we provide good tier 1, maybe borderline tier 2 supports, knowing who these kiddos are and what they're gonna, supports they might eventually need. I lean on the side of I'd rather give them that support and call it a good teaching tool than say, let's wait till they have an IEP or 504 plan. To me, then we've lost some time, and it gives me a chance to build some rapport with that teaching staff to say, you know what, I'm just going to be a hand to help you. What do you need? How can I help? Yes, I know this kid has some needs. There are some things we can do now, and then there's some things we have to kind of wait until we can't provide specialized services until the IEP happens. But just trying to provide good supports in the meantime, knowing that they're eventually going to be, from our AT's perspective, probably one of my kids that I'm serving.
Right. Ultimately, you're gonna end up providing that service anyway. And I think that's a good plan to be that that support for those teachers right from the start, and recognize with them that, yes, I get it. There's a lot of needs here, and let's do as much as we can right off the bat, so we don't have to wait. Kelly, other things you're seeing too?
I think that our teachers are really tired. And with that, I mean, a lot of them are just really, really, really exhausted. And we kind of shifted the way that we make referrals for everything in our ex-ed department. So you're talking about a new process, which can be frustrating. It's not the same process when you're already really tired. Plus, we're in Tennessee, so our teachers have also had to catalog all of their books, and that's been a challenge, and they're frustrated just for the time that all of that kind of stuff takes. So I think on our end, it's trying to offer resources that might help them, and help the kids that we can and that we're there for, to help lighten some of that load, and just try to become a partner with them, so that they don't see us as one more thing to add, but that it's going to help them, because they're just overwhelmed by all the things that are piled on and not taken off.
And again, we're seeing the start of another year, and the fact that we're already talking about educators being tired, and here it is, and today is the 12th of September. That's concerning, obviously, to us, as we try to think of ways to eliminate that level of I don't know what, even that, just fatigue that's on top of them, and think about how to do that. And you're Kelly, you touched on that whole cataloging of libraries in their rooms and things like that. And yeah, I was just reading something about that. I wish I could find, I'll see if I can find the link and drop it back in the chat. It was someone's kind of first person. I'm going to call it a vent session. It was an article, but it was a vent session about how this person's ultimately saying, I'm already this tired from the year, and now I'm doing this. And this is what I'm spending my time on. Is this really what I should be spending my time on? And I thought that was really interesting, because as you said, it's just one more thing people have to consider and think about and use their time and energy for as we go forward. So what else do we do? What do we do for educators to help them if they're this tired already? What do we do? Okay, thanks for coming. I'll catch you later. Right? I don't know. I don't know. What's the answer? Cassie, what's the answer?
I don't know if I have an answer, but I know right now a lot of the teachers that I'm working with just want to feel seen. They just want to recognize that this is happening and that there's people there to support them. I don't know if there is a magic answer, and the teachers I've talked to aren't really even expecting an answer per se, because they know there's not one. A lot of them are running short-staffed, and they've got students that aren't placed correctly or placed at all yet. And they just want to know that people hear them and are willing to help where they can.
Yeah. It goes back to what Alyssa shared before about how she's approaching that with her teachers, right, Cassie? That idea of, hey, if we're going to do what we can, we're in this together, right? This is us against whatever we want to rage against. We'll rage against it, but we'll rage together. And I think that's a really good way to start.
And it's okay that we're not perfect. And I think they need to hear that too, because teachers, we all tend to hold ourselves at a really high standard. And I think it's, good to have grace with each other and to let them know it's okay. It's okay if everything's not going perfectly. Everything's not going perfectly for me either. And we'll, like you said, we'll stick together.
Exactly. Go ahead, Carolyn.
No, I was clapping my hands. It wasn't a raised
Oh, I
hand.
thought that was a
like,
hand
"Ah."
wave. I only saw it real
Um,
fast and I was like,
no.
all right, I get it. I see it. I caught the visual cue.
No,
But
you're
it
good, but
cre-
I'm unmuted now, so I'll keep going. I'll bounce off of what Cassie said. So Sarah and I come from a different perspective as we're not in the schools, but we're supporting the educators when we get to go into schools, and we're starting to go and be in person a little bit more now. But I think that vulnerability and sharing with them that we're not going to be perfect. Heck, I'm still not perfect. I'm never intending to be perfect. And I think it goes back to just being heard. And so just, yes, it's a crazy year. And yes, this is going to be hard. And we are not going to jump in and do everything perfectly right away. Like, let's take it step by step. What can you do today that'll help you tomorrow? And what can you do tomorrow that'll help you the next day? And then coming in with, how can we help support that? Well, that was one of the questions we asked. So Sarah and I do an AAC professional learning, professional develop thing. And with one of the sites that I was able to work with, for their feedback at the end of our, hour and a half session, it was, what's your biggest takeaway? What questions do you still have? And then how can your ISD or us from Alt Shift help support you? And a lot of people are just saying, keep checking in, come in and do an observation, come in and model this for us. It's really not the, just to take this off my plate or take the student away. It's just show me how to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm here for a reason. But we also need you to show us that it's okay to fumble along the way too.
That's so true. Sorry, you want to add? I saw your mic come on.
Yeah, I was going to add before, I was going to bring back to it. I think what Alyssa is doing is really what teachers need. What we need is for people to come along and not necessarily say, let me solve this problem for you, or it's really easy, you should do this, but really just being in that space with them and avoid giving the advice, especially as ancillary staff. I always felt like I loved that I could float into a classroom, but there were some classrooms where I also liked the opportunity to float back out. And so recognizing that it's so different for me to come into a classroom for, 15 minutes or a half hour, a couple hours a week, and to just avoid giving advice, but to be there, to be heard, and to really partner with them versus coming in and saying, here are all the things you should do on top of all of the stuff that you're already doing. And to echo what Carolyn said, I think there's just so much of the need for all of us to feel like other people are hearing what we have to say, and that they're not going to solve the problem, but they're in it with us. And we see that a lot. Alyssa, what you mentioned is something that I hear from so many of our sites, is that especially in our early elementary, EKK first grade, teachers are seeing such a shift in how kids are coming to that space ready to learn. And so a first grade teacher that maybe was starting, a month and a half in, is starting to go back to what were kids learning in early kindergarten and kindergarten about how do you act as a learner? How do you learn? What does that look like? And we're just seeing a larger number of kids who are more dysregulated, who don't know how to be in that space with people. We're seeing kids that haven't had the opportunities to play with kids like we had before the pandemic because they grew up in a bubble. But we're going to get there, guys.
We are going to get there.
One of Carolyn's favorite words is yet.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a parent yesterday about a meeting she had with a school. And she had said, there's so many things that they kept saying, like, he's not doing this and he's not doing this and he really needs to be doing this. And we talked about how when we add that word yet at the end, he's not doing this yet. So what's the first thing that we need to do to get him there? And then let's go. So I just keep putting that yet, Carolyn, ever since you said that, like every day when I'm like, oh, I'm not there yet, but I'm getting closer.
I think it's so true. Yeah, yet is a great way to frame interactions with people. And I think this idea of what we're talking about is so critical. This thought of really thinking deeper about our partnerships as we move through the year. For any of us who are this kind of ancillary staff, and I'll agree, I'm an ancillary staff, so I just kind of pop in. Sometimes I feel incredibly guilty about the fact that I can pop in and pop out. That puts a very big weight on my head as I pop in. And so I really think about that as I'm getting ready to pop out of a class. I tend to really think about when is a good time right now for me to pop out. If I pop out when something big is going in the room, then I look like I'm running away, which I might be running away, but I don't want to look like I'm running away. But thinking about how to do that and, having these great conversations with different educators. I just had one with a team the other day, and, we were talking about planning for our year together. And that instantly, the second it came out of my mouth, I wanted to grab it and yank it back in. And I said, you know what? Let's not plan for our year together. Let's plan for September together. And how about we don't really plan big things. Let's just plan to get together. And when do you all get together? And then they had this conversation of, well, as a team, they meet once a week. And they're not sure if I'll be able to make time to meet with them. And I was like, no, I'll figure out a way to make time to meet with you. And it's in the late afternoon anyway, so it all works out. And I said to them, I am going to come just to be a part of the discussion. I'm not going to plan to talk to you for the whole time. I'm not going to plan anything. If it comes up, we'll figure it out as we go, kind of like this. It's not much different than this. It's really just about having a conversation. And this team comes from different schools in the same district. So it's all virtual anyway. And so it's not like they're all in a room and I'm remote. It's everybody's in their own room. And so we're going to try that, and we're going to approach it in very short chunks, and then feel if they might be ready for more than that. And if not, that's cool too. Whatever works, it's going to work. And like Sarah said, we'll get there. We'll figure it out, and we'll address things as we come. And I feel like we'll find conversation tracks that will follow from one week to another, which will give us an opportunity to have some thoughtful reflection on it before we come back together and then continue a conversation, because we've already seen that about something. And in fact, in the first meeting we had, with no plan, which was amazing because I didn't have to do anything except show up, which was great. And we had conversation. And one of them said to me, is this something you could talk to us about next time? I said, sure. Okay, that'd be great. Then let's do that. And so we're making these little chunks of our meeting. And when I mean chunks, I'm talking like 10 minutes of the meeting about something new. And the rest is going to be kind of interaction like this, which I think is a really, it's a really powerful way to do that. And it goes back to everything that you all just said about being heard and not feeling like we're putting a bunch on top of the stuff that they're also doing, but instead trying to find a way to support. So it has been tricky. It's tough for a funding source. They don't like to hear that. And I'll tell you that side of it. The administrator of this project does not like the fact that I do not have a plan. Does not like the fact that I don't have an agenda for every time we're going to get together. Does not like the fact that I don't have the entire 45 minutes planned out every time I'm going to see this group. And so I have then turned around and made an agenda. It's incredibly loose and it's incredibly broad and it really says nothing, but it has times attached to it. And I think that was all that person wanted. And so I think that that's fine. But I think that was really interesting. That's that other side of it, when you're coming in from outside, as this administrator pointed out, he said, we are paying you for this. And I said, I know, great, thank you. That's great. And I would feel comfortable saying that I feel like your staff will find value from this by the time we're done. So I think that we'll be fine. And then he explained to me how he runs a meeting, which was incredibly interesting. Not the way I would run a meeting, but good to know. It's really interesting. So that's kind of that other side of it, closer to the Carolyn and Sarah side of it, where I'm not in the school, but I'm in the school. And so that's been a little tricky. Yeah, I don't have the answer for that either yet, but I did send my timed agenda last week and I haven't heard back. So I'm taking that as a good sign. I don't know, question mark. I guess it's fine.
Well,
Anything else? Did someone come? Who are you? Sarah, go ahead.
I was going to piggyback on that. So Mike, I met you 2018 maybe ish. I don't know.
That sounds right.
I'm constantly like misinterpreting years and how long I've been in the project versus when I first met Mike. I don't know. But Mike, I first met Mike at a training that he was doing for our ISD. And you are really responsive. And I think that's what we're all talking about, is that people need us to be responsive to what they need in that moment. And that's something that I've always appreciated about you, Mike, as a presenter, as somebody that I can sit in meetings with, is you might walk in with an idea and an agenda, but based on the conversation and where people are at, you're going to shift if they need something different. And I think in education, unfortunately, a lot of times we tend to stick to that agenda, or we're like, we need to hit these points for the compliance piece of it. And what we're seeing is people are just so burnt out. They need to be in spaces too. Like we got to present in person to people for the first time since like March of 2020 this year. And I forgot how different that feels when you get to be in a space with people in person and really connect. And I think that's something that we're missing in education too, is that connection piece. We all came because we're people, right? We like people, we like that connection piece. And I think we need to try to figure out this year, how can we provide opportunities for people to connect outside of their classrooms? We came out of a pandemic where we all felt so siloed and isolated. And so how can we help people connect outside of their classrooms and with other educators and get excited about why they came into teaching or into education to start with?
Yeah, I think you're right, Sarah. And thank you. That was very nice, Sarah. If you want to talk more about me, that would be wonderful. We have 40 minutes. I'm on for it. But I think it's interesting. Doesn't that add a lot of weight onto what we do? If you're someone who's tasked with connecting with educators and helping them evolve their practice, it changes what we need to be skilled in. And it's really tricky. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I was just reading here, book recommendation. Soundtracks, the surprising solution to overthinking. I feel like I'm in an overthinking zone right now. I think I'm overthinking things, and I'm making things more complex for myself, and I don't have to. And so I picked this book off of my pile that's been sitting there looking to be read. I thought, oh, it's nice. It's a good time for this one to come out of the pile. But it is different, and trying to think about what's a way to be more responsive to the people that we're serving. So, and I'm in a little different spot than some of you. Like I serve educators. I do very little direct service with students. So I do some, but very little. Mostly it's professional development and that kind of educator-led training. And that example that I just shared with that administrator is really starting to be the norm, is that there's an expectation from that one side of that I'm going to come in and I'm going to give them something in these 5-minute blocks that's going to equal an hour. And then I'm going to come back at another time and they're going to be amazing technology people. And then we'll be even more amazing after the second time I come. And I'm having a hard time finding a way to align expectations with where people are at. I'm seeing people describe educators like Kelly did before, like they're already at the wall. They're kind of done-ish already. I'm not going to say done because that feels very negative. They're done-ish. There are moments where they don't really feel like they can take another piece in. And yet these administrators have these expectations. Not all, but I like to work in random thoughts that say all, but no, not all, but really having a hard time thinking about how to do that and how to be better at sharing that information with the gatekeepers that I tend to interact with. There, I'll call them the gatekeepers. That seems better.
So Mike, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Irene, of course.
Thanks. When you present yourself, because it sounds like the same thing as expert model versus coach.
Yeah.
So do you present yourself to the administrators as the expert who does professional development, et cetera, or as coming in as a coach for these teams? And does that wording make a difference?
Yeah, Irene, it's such a great question. I think that therein lies the confusion, is the description of what I can bring to a team sounds closer to a coaching model, and they have an expectation of an expert model. You're going to come in and do a bunch of stuff, at us and we're going to get better.
And it's because you straddle both.
I think that's the yeah, I get what you're saying. I think there are parts where this is the trick. This is the trick between expert and coach. I get contacted by people because I seen as an expert, seen as seen on TV, quotes around it. But yes, that idea of oh, this person must know, so they're going to tell us everything we need. And then it instantly shifts in those conversations to, hey, I'm excited to work with your team as we move forward through the year and explore different things. And those pieces don't always align. And so, yes, Irene, that is the problem, is that I don't want them to call because I'm an expert. I want them to call because I'm a coach, but they don't.
So it almost has a marketing component.
I need a marketing. Go ahead, Jennifer. What do you think?
So I have started writing contracts differently. And for those of you that don't do any private practice stuff, this probably doesn't pertain to you, but I do like an expert, like you want that training piece of augmentative and alternative communication, I will come in and give you that sit and get training if that's what you want. But then sometimes they get called in, it's usually sort of threefold, sort of, well, can you help with like figuring out these technical issues with the communication device or whatever it is? So then I write that in as more like technical support. And then I actually listed in the contract as coaching. And so I just listed out differently, sort of from different buckets, so that there isn't that confusion as to what it is. And if that administrator is really wanting that, we have a half day, can you come in and do this training? You know, it's fairly clearly defined. And we usually start with the training. That way we have that basis of knowledge through the coaching and that shared knowledge to kind of work off of. So that's been successful, but I've had the same experience where I don't know what they want going into it. So if I can distinguish that and really write it out really clearly in that contract, then that really seems to help.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, Jeff. I think what you said really resonated, is they don't know what they want sometimes, right? They want something. And I think for most of those contacts I get, which end up being some kind of contract, I think what they want is very much like Irene was saying, is they want someone to just come in and speak at them. And I'll use your example, Jennifer. I think that idea of, if someone contacted and said, hey, we have an opportunity for you to come in for a half a day and do training, that would be really exciting in a sense, because then I would have that conversation of, this is great, because that leaves a lot of time in that for conversation and planning for how your staff will move forward. But I think sometimes what happens on that, as soon as you offer that up, is someone will say, well, that's not what I had in mind at all. I just wanted you to speak from 9 to 12 and give them information for 3 hours.
The other thing that I've done is I've done like some case examples. So I'll say, well, you guys, to kind of, just so it's not that sit and get, but maybe a little bit more of that coaching. So you take your toughest kids, get me some video of your toughest kids. I don't even need it in advance. We'll just do it on the fly right there. And, so that we don't need releases. So you just, you show the video and then we walk through sort of like, this is my thought process. This is what I would do, and asking them to, more of those open-ended coaching questions. Well, tell me, what do you think about this? And kind of walking through some of that. So, I mean, I've done that as well. And that's been pretty successful with people walking away feeling, okay, this wasn't just sit and get, but this was also, now here are some real students in our district that we can apply this to. And that's been exciting for them.
Yeah, I think
good feedback.
Yeah, those are great. That's a great way to do that. I know that last year, Carolyn and Sarah and I did that with our teams that we were working with, where we had the teams bring in their cases and we worked through a set framework with them. We brainstormed ideas, and we did that over a couple sessions. We did that over a couple virtual sessions, which ended up being really exciting because it gave them an opportunity to kind of sit with it in between. And there's that benefit of having distance and time. Now you have you have the ability to sit and kind of marinate in it for a little bit. Think about how you would approach that. Different from your example and different from a lot of the things I get called for too, Jennifer, this idea of we have this day, this time, do that.
But bringing it back even to how that looks in the school environment, you know, I do that a little bit. We call them collaborative learning teams, but your professional learning network. And we're trying, because we have to be creative about how are we doing that professional development, because we don't have any sort of staff days to really work with anymore. We're using those weekly collaborative learning teams. And rather than spending, you know, 15 or 20 minutes watching the project core video together to work on, you know, whatever the skill is, we're saying, okay, watch this, you know, after school in the 15, 20 minutes you have. Now let's take that time that we have to meet, because we're bringing our speech therapist, our OT, our teachers, some of our paras are attending those collaborative learning times. Now let's apply that knowledge that we're learning with your students. So I'm doing this individually with different classrooms, and let's apply it to your students. What questions do you have about watching that video? How you know, like what's going to work? Tell me your thoughts. You know, like I'm not in here every day. What's going to make that hard? And then really as a team trying to brainstorm. So we're breaking down some of those barriers right from the start. We're not just doing that sit and get together. We can do that asynchronously, you know, taking some of the lessons we've learned about some of the asynchronous learning and how easy it is to do some of that on the side, but setting aside that actual maybe half hour, 45 minutes to really dig into how can we best support these students, because that's a little bit of time we have, maybe once or twice, you know, once a week or every other week. So
how are you seeing with the educators? Are they doing that work? So you're flipping it on them. Are they doing the pre-work and coming ready to participate?
I think that you have to have a couple people that are going to hold everyone accountable. So as long as I have the teacher on board, or I have the speech therapist on board, then that's holding the other people accountable. We've been able to get some of our administrators, our principals to do some of this work in some of our buildings, and that's also holding them accountable. And some of it has been just using Jamboards and everybody commenting. And when you get your administrator or your principal commenting on something, well, I think then your para or whoever is going to be a little bit more involved. So we've had some success doing it that way as well, but every team is different. And so it's really about creating that culture and that safe place where people are willing to put themselves out there and admit that things are hard if things aren't going well. And if you don't have that level of trust, then you can't have those honest conversations. So
yeah. I think you're right. And I think that it takes us time to get there. You know, sometimes the team is already there and we come in and we're like, ooh, this team functions pretty well. And I might be able to jump to step 3 where I can assign things that we can look at and we can work on it together. And then I think other teams, like you said, we have to kind of gauge as we get in there of, ooh, this is not really a group that has an understanding of the value of doing pre-work to come prepared.
And there's a lot of divisiveness too. There's a lot like now where we've got a lot of people that just aren't getting along, have very different beliefs. You know, I'm just a para, that's not my job. You know, like I hear all of that all the time. And so like I have completely switched all of my professional learning into you know, a lot of the Brene Brown and, you know, all of that. And just how do we build a strong culture? How do we build trust? How do we get these people to have these honest conversations and even just admit that things are hard and that they need help, rather than just completely checking out and saying, I'm going to quit, or, you know, whatever it may be. You know, they've got to show up and they have to be willing to do the work. And sometimes I feel like a therapist more than, you know, like,
yeah, right, exactly. But I think that it's so funny that you said that, because that's exactly what I was going to say, is that this is how we have to sneak those things in, because I think when someone reaches out to us for some kind of professional development, I'll just call it that for now, professional development, they're not bringing us in to be therapists to their staff. They're bringing us in because they want their staff to learn something. But yet we have to focus on all those things we just described in order to prepare them to accept some learning and move forward. But yet if you were to write that, like, hey, we're going to spend a lot of time building trust. And the person's going to say, well, no, I'm hiring you to come in to teach them how to use the Chromebook. Yes, I know you are. But as a team, we're going to be better moving forward if we're all part of the solution. And that's a tough sell to people.
This is the first year that I've done that. I created a presentation over the summer. I've got like clips from Patrick Lencioni, like all sorts of stuff in there, just on building a strong culture and building trust. And the 5 dysfunctions. I actually have the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and we go through each one of those and we're talking about them, because I feel like that's the elephant in the room. That like is what's keeping us from doing the actual work that we need to do. And with school turnover right now and people burning out, like again, like we're hearing those things already at the start of the school year, and we're in our district, this is our 3rd week. I mean, and for me to go in and hear, I'm gonna quit, like
Right.
it's scary. It's really scary. And so I think, I've gone back to, we have to start working on that stuff before we can even get to any of the AP stuff, because otherwise I walk in and I walk out and nothing happens. And I show
Right.
up, a week or 2 later and we're no better off than we were.
Exactly.
And
There's no movement. Yeah.
to Sarah, when Sarah was talking a little bit about doing in-person trainings, I did one right before the start of the school year for our intellectually disabled teachers. And there was a group of teachers sitting in the back that probably needed to hear this the most. And they were back at their back table working on lesson planning together. So they weren't even engaged. They weren't, but it's like, well, they're not having time to set up their classrooms. So, is that even what they needed in that moment? They were
right, exactly
doing their own thing. And just because somebody said, this is where you need to be at this time to listen to Jennifer talk about communication, what they really needed in that moment and what they needed their admin to advocate for is give them some time to prep for the school year, because clearly we've got too many meetings at the start of the school year, and this isn't what they needed.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so true. Carolyn, go ahead. That's a hand raised. I see it.
This is the hand raise. So this is still on point, but kind of loops back to, and I don't remember if Jennifer, you said it, or Mike, if you said it, but talking about, does the team see the value of the pre-work? And that kind of struck me, because if we go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, teachers are tired.
Mm-hmm.
So we only have, and they only have so much time to dedicate to anything all day, and only so much brain, capacity, in addition to then going home and being spouse and parent and whatever. And so that's something that Sarah have been going, and I've been going back and forth on, is, we have all these big ideas for Michigan. So big ideas, and we're not allowed to actually focus on those quite yet. So we're developing them in the meantime. But part of that was kind of this like boot camp for speech pathologists, as far as like, what are we missing? And we've spent all summer creating these modules that are going to be launched next month, which we're very excited about. But it's that fine balance of how much do we ask people, if we do a boot camp, to do ahead of time, when we know that caseloads are chaotic and people are already being like, if I'm a speech therapist and I've got a little chunk of time, I might be asked to go sub into a classroom so that the teacher can get a lunch, or go do bus duty, or go do lunchroom duty. So people are having less and less time to actually just exist as themselves. And so how much pre-work do we want them to actually do? So I don't know if it's necessarily do they see the value of pre-work? Do they have the capacity to take on some of that pre-work ahead of time? But to kind of loop us back to what we were doing and talking about, how do we get it so that there's more interaction and more coaching during these sessions? That's another thing that over the past couple of years, Sarah and I've really started developing. And Mike, we're just going to credit all of this to you.
This has been a great meeting.
I know,
so far. I'm really enjoying this.
I know.
Alyssa, you know you like this. Stop it. Stop acting so upset, Alyssa. You know you like this. Tell me more about me.
Part of this goes that it's not just us getting up and talking for 3 hours. And it's really, if they ask a question, we ask the question back to them. Well, what kind of students would you use this with? What kind of students would you use this with? Let's have that discussion. Let's talk about that. And so with our PD, so for example, with building blocks to autonomous communication, I was given through 2 hours, 2.5 hours to meet with this team, and it's the whole building. So it's 80 staff members. So it's teachers and ancillary and paraprofessionals. And we spent that time talking about fundamentals of AAC and their AT process. So what's already in place? If you guys have questions, here's your AT team. They're helping to support this as we go through, but built in it, it's, we have a handout that requires them to reflect. We have questions that we're asking throughout, that it's not just here's 2 hours and then give me your feedback at the end. It's let's pause and kind of, I think it's an 8 and 2 rule. Like every 8 minutes of us talking, we give them 2 minutes to process or reflect, something like that. But giving them that chat time, and then built into when we're partnering with these sites, we ask them for a recap session. So last month I was with Livingston, so just north of Ann Arbor, if you know Michigan, and the Brighton area, and we did our fundamentals and our AT work. And then at the end of this week, we're getting together, and I'm joining virtually. It's nothing crazy, but for an hour and a half, we're taking all of the questions that they had from that feedback and putting it back to them and saying, okay, these were the questions that we kept hearing. What are you guys doing to support that before we give you some feedback on what we think on that? And that recap time really allows them to sit and process that information over the course of the month before we say, okay, here's a month with content, and then next month there's new content, and next month there's new content. It really comes to slow down all of the content we're giving them and giving them that time to think, how can I apply this? And I know you said, we're doing the communication bill of rights, or all means all, or there's no yeah buts. But now I have a student that I'm finding myself saying, yeah, but they have these behaviors, or yeah, but they're, too complex. So how do we move and pull ourselves back from that after actually applying that for the month? So it's asking a lot, coming from being on the consultant side of saying, hey, we need all of this time, but the sites that we're working with are finding that time. And I know that people are appreciating just having that time to have conversations and not being talked at for hours on hours.
Yeah. And it's opportunities for deeper learning. Jennifer said, we do these sessions and then nothing changes. We see the needle does not move at all, because what we've done is given them a bunch of information they might not be ready for at that moment. So the slowing it down, where to some people that sounds like the worst thing you could do. You talk to a gatekeeper, they don't want to hear slowing it down. They want to get a bunch of content out. But you could have that argument that by slowing it down, we will get there faster than just giving them a bunch and then never checking in on it. And then asking at the end, what did you learn from this? And they didn't learn anything. Go ahead, Jennifer. Jennifer, you keep hopping around my screen. I'm going to go. There you are.
When I did the raise hand, it like moved me.
It brought you to the front, then it brought you back. And
all these Zoom updates from summer that I haven't been privy to. So in that same ID training that we did, the teachers were talking about when we're coming in the classroom, we're doing coaching, we're working, with the students because there's not time to pull out or, coordinate schedules. So we're in the classroom, and one of the teachers said, when I've got the peers asking me questions and, I've got like the whole classroom around me and it's just chaos. She goes, they want answers right away and I can't give them answers because they can't process it. So she said, so another teacher was kind of piped up and she's like, well, you know what? I had that same problem. I now have like a bulletin board set aside, and when somebody suggests something, I tell them to put it in the parking lot. And then she goes, after I've been able to, sit at the end of the day or a couple days later, reflect on some of that stuff, it's not an automatic no. Sometimes what I think might be an automatic no changes into a yes. And that was a really big aha moment for me as I'm going in doing a lot of these coaching things, because I know it can get overwhelming for people. Like take some of those suggestions, especially, classroom teachers, you've got all these interventionists coming in, you might have a DHH teacher and everybody has an opinion on something and how to do something. I really like that idea of, well, let's take it, and it doesn't actually have to be a bulletin board. It could just be, some sort of space. It could be a jam board, just somewhere to put those ideas, and then you can always come back and reflect on them. So that was something that from a training that another teacher had. And then, talking about your question, Carolyn, about how much can they do ahead of time? Like that's where having these regular weekly collaborative learning team meetings. They meet as a team every week. I'm going in every other week. That way they have time to build that relationship and that expertise among themselves. They're not always looking at me as the expert, but then when they can save those questions or anything that they want from me every other week or monthly if I'm attending, that's been really successful. And again, like they're willing to find that time if they buy into it. But we know that like things should be short snippets. So it might just be watching a video that's 5 minutes long on something and then trying that one thing, because if they're overwhelmed with trying too many things at once, then it all falls apart. So like we've just been trying to keep it regular and consistent, but then really small snippets to try.
I love that. And I love that idea. And when I thought about small snippet, and then I thought back to your story you just shared about the person having this kind of realization of the parking lot idea. These are those moments that I know I'm very bad at documenting when those happen. I hear that and I'm like, that's awesome. And then I'll use it later when I talk to another group. But in the moment, I don't think to document it with that person. Even if it's like, hey, can I just turn my camera on for 3 seconds and you explain that, like a minute, and then share that with the team. And I think that value of the weight that carries of one of their colleagues sharing that is a thing that people will make time for, those little text snippets. And I know that's one of the things on my list this year to be better at, is collecting things in real time as they happen, and not just thinking of them as I sit down to do a presentation the day before it's due, but instead collecting those as I go and really having them, and letting them be as powerful as they can be. That's incredibly powerful. That's an ultimate aha moment. It's like, well, wait a second. Yeah, if I'm gonna automatically say no to something, it may be just for no other reason that I'm doing 4 other things at that moment. It has nothing to do with the actual idea itself. It's the fact that I'm doing all these other things. And so if those things have a place to live that we can revisit, and then build on those, and then almost create the parking lot to an FAQ kind of thing. Like here was a issue, here was a solution someone had. And you could go back to those and read through and look at them or share them in some way with each other. I think that's such a powerful way to do it. And again, we keep talking about this idea, last year it was make things 10 minutes. Now, are we saying that maybe it's making things even shorter for people? Maybe it's share things that are 5 minutes, and, don't be such a burden on their time. And I know burden's not the right word, but I'm going to use it anyway. A burden on their time. Don't feel like another thing that they might not see value in. I was the one, Carolyn, who said that it didn't have value to them. And that's exactly why at that moment, 100 other things have value to them. Jennifer's example of people in the back of the room doing their lesson plans, that's not a slight on you. That's just that's a commentary on their life right now. And so it's also important for us to remember that that's not these people hate Jennifer, or the thing you're sharing is not right or good or helpful or beneficial. It's all of those things. It's just at that moment, getting a lesson plan for the next day might be a bit more important at that point. And so finding ways to, we talk a lot about this and we think about PD, this idea of being available for them when they are ready. And so having an opportunity for them to have an aha moment, like, ooh, remember Jennifer was talking about that. Remember Sarah or Carolyn was talking about that when they came in. Where was that? And what was that they were saying? Then you have that opportunity to go back and find that information. So I think it's so
well, yeah, and I think for me, it's about stealing those teachable moments. To be in a classroom, and I've done a lot of in classroom time with kids and paraprofessionals or whoever is in their world, and in that moment going, oh, when this happens, this is something you might be able to try, or have you thought about, asking some good reflective questions of them again, because in the moment it seems to be like, if you were to ask them after school, hey, what can I help you with? A lot of times it's, oh, we're doing okay.
Right.
you know, but if you're in the classroom in the moment, a lot of times what you get is that real honest, oh yeah, I never really thought like, but this activity is really hard for the student to participate in. What could we do that would make that easier? So I think it's the catching them in the moment and then providing some good coaching kind of structured questions that lead them to the place, you know, versus, I mean, we just don't have the time nor day for a lot of PD. We did the day we came back on the 2nd the morning was PD, and my SLP cohort and I did a like embedding communication, you know, thing in which we have recorded now and I can share with people. But my next opportunity is probably in January to provide that kind of professional development. So for me, it has to be that good classic on the job training in the moment kind of, and instead of going, try this, it's like, okay, well, why do you think she's doing this? And what do you think that, you know, that what is that telling us? Trying to kind of lead them to the place where they come up with a solution they think would work. And it may very well have been the solution I might have recommended, but it's a lot better than me just coming in that expert model and going, you should do. Because then they're going to, next time there's a problem, they're going to go, hey, wait, where's that expert person to come in and tell me what I should do?
Right. Exactly.
So I think I'm convinced more and more that 80% of this role is being a good coach.
Yeah. I think you're doing a disservice to that number. I think it's even more than that. Yeah. I've been
dealing with lots of technical issues this year. So I feel like 20% of me is tech support.
Okay. We're going to
if you
talk
could
again
see
in
behind
October.
me if you could see me behind me in my office, you would see the cracked iPads and
Yeah.
everything else that have come my way. So 80-20 right now, but I could think that maybe by the time we get to November, we're in a 90-10 situation.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that whole idea again and finding those opportunities. And again, going back to that same thought that I just had before, Alyssa, that idea of asking them good questions, having them work through some of this collaboratively with you. I hate to say work through it by themselves because they're not, because you're there and guiding that process. How do we collect that aha moment to share with someone else? It goes back to that same thought of, okay, like, you know, I want to be able to show that to someone else, not necessarily that answer necessarily. That answer might be the answer for someone else too, but I want to find an opportunity to highlight that process to empower others to say, well, if that person can do it, maybe I can do it. Or how would I have approached that? And it makes them start to think about that little, just think about it differently and maybe even open them up to being more receptive to coaching and not having an expectation of an expert's going to swoop in at any moment and solve my problem and then swoop back out. But instead, looking at one of us as not the expert swooping in, but here comes a partner that we can talk about this together and come to an answer. That's a much more powerful thing for us to be part of.
So Mike, I was just looking for a book because I was like, Mike did it so nicely. And now I'm like, where is this book? Because I just had it.
Well, the trick is to read books while you're sitting at your desk, and then they're always right here.
Mine are everywhere in my house. So that brought me to thinking, I just read The Leader's Guide to Coaching in Schools, and it talks a lot about how thank you. See, I just knew I needed to say it.
I have it over there somewhere. Yeah.
Carolyn's got it right there. I think it's in my backpack on the ground, actually. But that idea of like, we can model a coaching way of being with people, and I don't need to walk in and say like, I'm here to be your coach. It's more, how can we partner and how can we model? And we talk to a lot of schools who are like, yeah, but I'm not a coach. Like, we don't have a designated coach.
Right.
That's what I really like about their approach, is that you don't have to have the title coach in your title. But it can just be a part of what you embody as people, is to coming to that space as a shared learner versus I'm an expert that's here to solve this for you. I came from birth to 3, and we so often talked about with families, you know, you will know your child way more than I ever will. And so, yes, I have some tools that I got when I came through grad school that maybe you didn't as a parent, but really it's how can we work together to tweak this to really help support your child. And I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do in RPD, is move away from that expert model of talking at people to really paring down, like if I only had 10 minutes to give you my elevator speech on why you should do this, what are those things that I'm going to really make sure in my PD? And then now, how can I build in opportunities for people to really wrestle with that and to think about it and think about their students and how can they apply that? And it's been challenging because trust me, if you would have seen me present like 5 years ago, oh my gosh, like now I'm like, oh, I just like got up and talked at people and they probably were like, shut up, like just go away. But it's been so rewarding to hear those conversations because, you know, educators are really smart and they came to this field for a reason. And we just need to figure out how can we help them get back to that place of giving them the professional autonomy to figure it out. Sorry, that was a lot of like, woohoo, but
No, it was great.
like
It was perfect.
there's a room for being that expert, but doing it in a way that's like a coach and rethinking how we can provide that PD to be more meaningful.
Yeah, Jennifer threw in the chat about you're taking your elevator pitch and recording it. Right? It's like, here's what I'm about.
Mhm.
Here's what you're about to get into with this. Here's my thought and my philosophy on how this would go for a longer period of learning and working together. How many times do we all say that? Everybody learns something when we go somewhere, whether you're in the front or the back of the room, it doesn't matter. Whether you're the one standing up or you're sitting at one of the desks, we're all going to learn something and it's great. That's the whole point. I think Sarah's right. Everybody comes to this, everybody's very knowledgeable and have really great things to add. And I think we just have to have people find them ready for that. I'm laughing because I started my teaching my master's class last week. And we did the first class and I'm packing up as we're leaving. And one of the students kind of drifted over. And I was like, oh, do you need something? Like, was I not clear? Because that could certainly happen. What's going on? And she said, this class is not like any class we've had in our master's program. Is this what it's going to be like every week? And I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is what it's going to be like every week. And she sat there for a minute. She's like, I like it. I like it. You actually asked us questions and we were having conversations. She's like, you had slides and we did go through slides. But she said, you didn't have many. How many did you have? I'm like, I don't know, like 15 maybe. I don't know, like not many. But we had a lot of conversation and a lot of discussion about just things. And she said, yeah, this is going to be really great. And I felt really good about that driving home. And if I've never told you this story, I have a 2-hour drive home from that class every night, which is awesome, as you could imagine. But she emailed me the next day and she's like, hey, thanks again. I'm really liking our class. I was like, wow, all right, great. I haven't connected with any of the other 18 people yet, but this one I have really hooked, which is awesome. And her last word in her email was, I like AT. Me too. This is wonderful. So it's just those different approaches to how we're doing things. It's so important. All right, 2 minutes before the top of the hour. Not only do I want to be respectful of your time, I have a meeting at 1 o'clock I have to go to. So I'm going to be respectful of my own time as well. But think about this. You don't have to answer now, but this is one of those things. Chew on it for the week. Think about it as we go forward. Ideas for this event moving forward throughout the year. A couple questions for you. One, do you still want to stay with an hour? Do we want to adjust the time and change it? And that I'm just trying to get a sense of being responsive to other people. And I want it to be known. I hate being the boss of this, by the way, but I don't mind being the boss of this, but I don't. All right, it's fine, I guess. One of you wants to be the boss. I'm all for it. Timing. Would you like to continue on the no planning approach to this, or incorporate in other predetermined topics where maybe we try to bring others in? And I go back to our special events from last year. Now, granted, if we do them a lot, they suddenly are not special anymore, but okay, remember that. But is that something that people want to do as we go forward? So think about how that approach to that. As we get into these, we'll fall back into the pattern of any feedback from last week, any good things that are happening this week, any things you want to talk about as we go forward. So we'll do that approach anyway. But if you feel like you want to put in topics, I almost want to call this the AT chatting of town hall, where AT chat has a topic, but we're always able to go off and do whatever we want. So I don't know. I like not planning, by the way. I'm a big fan. But if you guys want planning, that's fine too. So think about that. Don't answer now. That was something to think about as you go forward this week. Any thoughts before we hang up? Anyway. Oh, Kelly, 2 cents. And I just closed the chat and then she put something in it. My 2 cents. Most weeks unplanned, maybe once a month for a special event. Okay, Kel, I'm down with that. Yeah. And that's kind of what we ended up doing with those special events. It's like when something came up in conversation that felt like a bigger discussion, we made that a special event. Okay. One time a month, question mark. Yeah, I have notes. That's right. I'm writing notes as we're here. I'm doing stuff. It's not all freewheeling without any plan. Okay. Think about that as we go. We'll chat about it next week as we get back together. Have a great rest of the week. It was so good to see everybody again. And I'll see you next week. See ya.